Well, by now you've seen the WNBA player Sophie Cunningham all over social media. She was asked about her position on biological men competing in women's sports, but here's a reminder in case you actually missed it.
On that same vein, in that story with ESPN, you talked about wanting to protect young girls who shouldn't have to go against biological men. Just can you expand your viewpoint on that?
I mean, I think I said what I said. I think it's kind of common sense. And I think I'll always believe in that. I think it's really important to protect children, and that's little girls who are also involved in that category. And so I stand on what I said, and I always believe that.
Yeah. Do you see your advocacy on that, like taking any form going forward?
You know, I don't know. I'm not a very political person, but I do have beliefs. I have morals, and I'll always stand on those and be true to who I am. And I think people are going to take it how they want to take it, but I've never even really said anything about that. And so when it comes just to protecting young girls in sport and women in sport, I feel very strongly about that. I think that's why you have Title IX. That's why you have some of the greats in women's sports. If Title IX and women's sports weren't protected, then you wouldn't hear about any type of women in sport. And so I think in the future, it's just really important to protect.
Do you think, I guess, along the line like that, it goes against perhaps some people might say, hey, for the trans community, this could be something that could come back on us or be targeted against us. Like, how do you, I guess, view that sort of critique?
You know, like I said, I extend love, and I don't dislike anyone. Like, I think there's room for absolutely everyone here, and I think there's room to love everyone. And I truly think when you get people in the same room and you have conversations, you actually have a lot in common with a lot of people. And so I'm there to love, but I'm also there to love biological women, and I think that there are rights that need to be protected. And like I said, I'm going to stand true to that. I'll never falter in my beliefs in that, but I have never once said I hated the trans community. Like I said, I think there's space for everyone.
Common sense. That's really what this entire debate comes down to, because 20 years ago, what she said wouldn't have been a controversial statement at all. But today she's being booed at away games in all these arenas she's playing in, and protesters are showing up outside games. We even have coaches wearing shirts responding to what she said. There was even an WNBA team owner that was suspended after she berated two teenage girls who were supporting Cunningham at a game. And now the WNBA itself is being forced to discuss one of the easiest questions the world has ever asked. But will the WNBA be able to define a woman? Today we're talking about Sophie Cunningham, women's sports, and what happens to a culture when something as basic as male and female become controversial. I'm Trent Stewart. This is the Trent Stewart Podcast. Hello, welcome again to the Trent Stewart Podcast. My goal is to help people understand the times and know what to do. And here's what I find fascinating. The WNBA, they already have a rule, and it says only players who are women are eligible to play in the WNBA. That sounds pretty clear until somebody has a difficult time answering the question, what is a woman? This story, though, is much bigger than basketball. You just heard Sophie Cunningham. She's a guard for the Indiana Fever. And by the way, I'm a fan of the Fever. I've watched them play every game ever since Caitlin Clark came into the league. And Sophie was originally asked about transgender athletes competing in women's sports. And she basically said, I don't hate anybody. I love everybody. But I want to protect young girls who shouldn't have to compete against biological men. And then she was asked about it again, and rather than backing away from it, she said, I said what I said. I think it's kind of common sense. And that's kind of what makes this story so interesting to me. She's not making some complicated philosophical argument. She's saying something almost everybody understands. Men and women are different, and those differences matter in sports. But after Cunningham made those comments, protests started showing up outside Indiana Fever games. She's been booed in arenas when she touches the ball. The Minnesota Lynx coach, Cheryl Reeve, wore a shirt that said, "Trans kids belong." Now listen, every human being has dignity and value, but that's not the question. The question isn't, do transgender people have value? Of course they do. The question is, should biological males be allowed to compete in women's sports? That's it. And one of the things we've become really good at culturally is avoiding difficult questions by replacing them with emotional slogans like trans kids belong. Nobody's questioning whether or not trans kids should be valued. Belonging and eligibility are not the same thing. Every sport understands this. A 17-year-old is not eligible for a 12-year-old basketball league. A 220-pound wrestler doesn't compete in the 125-pound weight class. Not because the 220-pounder wrestler is a bad guy. It's simply because categories exist for a reason, and women's sports are categories. It's a category. Stephanie White is the head coach of the Fever. She was asked her stance on the issue, and unfortunately, women will not get any help from her because she's not smart enough to have a conversation. At least that's what she said. Let's take a look.
What is your stance on men or athletes who test as biological male participating in women's sports? What's your personal stance?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I would say that I'm educated enough from a scientific standpoint. I don't ever believe that exclusion is an answer. I just don't. I do think, when we think about various levels of sport, various governing bodies of sport and things that go into that, like I said, I'm not educated enough at the different levels. I know growing up, I played with the boys all the time.
So
there weren't girl sports.
Would you welcome a biological male in WNBA?
Again, it's like, I don't know, when we talk about biological male and scientifically where we are, I think it's a totally different scenario. As I said, I'm not educated enough in terms of transgender and transitioning to give you a smart answer. I would say, though, that I just don't feel like exclusion is an answer, and I think that we need to have deeper, more layered conversations.
And you'd be okay with them in the locker room?
Okay, well, it's laughable, but then again, it's so sad that I can't laugh at it. I'm not educated enough to talk about it. And exclusion, she doesn't want to exclude anybody. Exclusion is that's not what the question was. It's really a cop-out. Just say what you believe. I'm going to use this logic the next time my wife actually asks me to do the dishes. Honey, I'm just not educated enough on the dishwashing mechanics. I've not been taught the proper detergent water ratio. I'll see if that works. I doubt it will. Meanwhile, 2 teenage girls attended a Seattle Storm game. They're holding signs that were supporting Sophie. And one of the signs essentially thanked her for speaking up for girls. And a Seattle Storm co-owner tried to bully them, right there in front of all the fans. The Storm later apologized, and the WNBA fined the owner and suspended her for 5 home games. I mean, think about the irony. We're constantly told this entire movement is about inclusion, but apparently inclusion can become very exclusive when somebody disagrees with you. And that's why Christians need to understand something about this whole tolerance movement. The old understanding of tolerance was, I disagree with you, but I believe you have the right to speak. The newer understanding has become, you've got to affirm my position or your disagreement itself is harmful to me. And that's just not tolerance. That's called conformity. So why does this matter? Well, it matters for a lot of reasons, but let me give you 3 today. First, words have to mean something. If the word woman simply means anybody who identifies as a woman, then inevitably the category of women's sports will cease to exist. And this is where Christians have to understand what's happening underneath this debate. For most of human history, the words man and woman describe something about biological reality. Today, our culture has moved those words away from the body and placed them primarily in the mind. Instead of your body helping you determine who you are, your internal sense of identity determines what your body means. That is a massive philosophical difference and change. And we're watching the consequences of that change themselves out in sports. Because sports force us to deal with the reality of biology. and we cannot separate our biology when it comes to sports. Second, women's sports exist because men and women are different. Now, this reality isn't complicated. Women deserve the opportunity to compete against other women. Men and women are equally valuable, but equal value does not mean physical sameness. There are biological differences between males and females that matter in athletics: height, muscle mass, bone structure, strength, speed, power. Hormone treatment might change some characteristics, but it doesn't make a man a woman. If biological sex doesn't matter, then here's the obvious question. Why do we even have the WNBA? I've got an idea. Let's drop the W and make it a C. We'll call it the CNBA, the Co-ed National Basketball Association. We'll have a league with men and women playing together. We'll reach inclusive nirvana, and everybody can be happy. We'll say 50% women, 50% men. And so you can be trans, you can be gay, you can be straight, you can be a man, you can be a woman, doesn't matter. Everybody can play. Now, of course, that won't happen because nobody wants to watch that. Let's be honest. No one was watching the WNBA until Caitlin Clark showed up 2 years ago. And now that they have finally broken through and have a significant fan base, they're going to throw it all away over this issue. Okay, the third point is really the most important. Here it is. This is really a question about whether reality is discovered or created. And so this is where the Christian worldview becomes incredibly important. Genesis 1:27 says, male and female, he created them. Jesus affirms that same creation order in Matthew 19. He says, he who created them from the beginning made them male and female. Christianity teaches that your body isn't an accident. Your body isn't meaningless. Your body is part of God's creation. Therefore, my identity isn't something that I create completely independent of my body. But in this culture, that message is increasingly the opposite. The modern message is look inside yourself, discover your sexual identity. Then the outside world will help you recognize and help you choose your identity. But Christianity is saying something radically different. You don't create yourself. God created you. So freedom isn't ultimately found in inventing yourself. Freedom is found in understanding who God created you to be. And that means the body matters. Your body matters. Christians are called to love all people. No matter how you identify yourself, you're a person made in the image of God, and Christians are called to treat everybody with dignity. Jesus tells us to love our neighbor, but loving our neighbor doesn't require lying to our neighbor. Truth without love can become cruel. Love without truth becomes evil. In fact, Ephesians 4 tells Christians to speak the truth in love. And so in truth and in love, we are called to speak up. And so I would encourage you, more Christians. I wish more Christians were speaking up for women's athletes. I wish more Sophie Cunninghams would emerge from professional sports and they would show their support. I think it's time for Christians to stop being afraid of getting made fun of. It's time for Christians to stop acting like their voice doesn't matter. The more we let radical ideologies have the loudest voice, the more power we give them. So I applaud Sophie Cunningham for talking about this. And I think it's going to be interesting to see if she gets traded after this year. I hope it doesn't happen. I won't be surprised next season in the WNBA if every team blackballs her and this is her last season in the league. We'll see. I hope I'm wrong. But to my point, if there are more Christians in the WNBA and even the NBA who are speaking up on this, then I think the repercussions would be smaller because, yeah, you can blackball one person out of the league, but it's a lot harder if 100 or 1,000 are all speaking up for women and saying the same thing. Now, if the drama wasn't already enough, wait, there's more. During a recent game against the Chicago Sky, DeJounte Carrington absolutely clobbers Sophie Cunningham around the head and neck. Sophie was going up for a layup, and she just got mauled. I mean, they called a flagrant 2 foul. Carrington was ejected. It was an obvious target on Sophie, but wait, there's more. If that wasn't bad enough, then Carrington goes right out. She gets kicked out of the game and immediately tweets white privilege at the Indiana Fever. Now, Carrington has since said that her post wasn't about the ejection and that contact with Cunningham wasn't intentional. Whether you believe that or not, I'll leave that up to you. But when you foul someone that hard, you mean to do it. Like, it's not an accident that you go that hard at a particular person. Trying to go after a block and fouling them, or trying to even prevent somebody from making a layup, is one thing. What she did was way excessive. It'd be like an NFL linebacker giving a quarterback a concussion and then getting called for targeting, and then he gets up and says, well, I didn't mean to hurt him. Well, usually when a 300-pound athlete running 50 miles per hour hits someone in the head, it's most likely going to happen. Cunningham is very lucky she didn't get hurt worse. All this just adds to the drama of the league right now. And speaking of drama, wait, there's more. Former NBA player Enes Kanter-Freedom and another NBA player that nobody really has ever heard of are now declaring for the 2027 WNBA draft. They're essentially trying to force the logical question. And so based on what the league says, these men really should be allowed to play. Now, obviously, they're just trying to make a point. There is zero chance these men are going to be taken seriously. But the WNBA's commissioner, Kathy Engelbert, has told teams that the league is discussing transgender participation and eligibility. So think about how disturbing that is. This ideology has taken over so much of professional sports that it looks like they're going to come up with certain standards. Standards like hormone levels, like testosterone levels, and whatever other standards they want to make. And I think we're going to eventually see men in the WNBA. But the league is going to create the policy that is going to easily reject men like Enes Kanter, and they'll have to arbitrarily create these tests and probably weird formulas that nobody will really understand except for them. It won't make any sense to anyone, and it's going to come down to league officials making a case-by-case decision on which men they will allow and which men they won't. So it won't be fair, it'll be weird, and there'll be all kinds of controversy around it. And the moment they allow it, the WNBA will be done. My guess is that they're going to allow one or two in, and then that's going to appease like their inner conscience. But the men won't make that big a difference. And here's why they won't. Because they're not going to be very good athletes, right? They're going to choose men who aren't very good. So, women like Asia Wilson will still dominate these guys. And then they'll say, see, told you we could play against men. But it's all going to be a joke. And the WNBA will be seen as a joke. And it'll be just a huge mess. And they're going to miss out on this golden opportunity that they have to generate more fan base and elevate women's sports and elevate women in general. And they're just missing out on a huge opportunity for women. And who gets hurt at the end of the day? All of these women get hurt. And as Christian women in the league, they're going to have to face another hard question at that point. Do we want to work for a company that doesn't know the difference between a man or woman? And I guess that'll be another question that they'll have to run through personally themselves. But what should we do as Christians? If the purpose of this podcast is to help you understand the times and know what to do, let me give you 4 things that we can do. First of all, do not be afraid to say what is true. Men and women are different, period. That shouldn't be a radical statement. You don't have to scream it. You don't have to be obnoxious about it. You don't have to intentionally insult someone with that. You just understand that you don't need to surrender the truth because someone tells you that acknowledging biology is hateful. It's just ridiculous. Christians don't get to change truth based upon what's popular. In fact, Romans 12:2 says, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind. There's always going to be pressure for Christians to conform. Our response has got to be to think biblically. And sometimes saying something that should be common sense is going to require courage. Secondly, don't confuse courage with cruelty. Some conservatives think being offensive proves they're courageous. I don't think that. Sometimes it just means you're being rude. We don't need to call people names. We don't need to celebrate when someone's humiliated. Those people aren't the enemy. They are people made in the image of God who need the grace of Jesus, just like the rest of us. We should be able to say, I believe biological males should not compete in women's sports, and then treat the transgender community sitting across from us with kindness and dignity. Those aren't contradictory. That's Christian conviction. That's truth, and it's love. Thirdly, we've got to teach our children a biblical view of the body. So parents, don't assume your kids understand this. They're growing up in a culture telling them that their feelings define reality. And we've got to teach them something better. Your body is good. God made you that way. You are not an accident. Your identity isn't something you have to invent. Psalm 139 says, I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. We've got to teach our kids that they are wonderfully made just as they are by a heavenly Father who loves them. And that's an incredibly freeing reality, I think, to teenagers and to young people when they embrace that truth. So you don't have to spend your life trying to create an identity that impresses other people. Your Creator has already spoken, and your identity is not found in who you want to have sex with or what your gender is or athletics or popularity or politics or anything else. For the Christian, our deepest identity is found in Christ. And then fourthly, we've got to protect women's sports. You can love transgender people and still believe women's sports should remain women's sports. In fact, say that without apologizing. Girls deserve athletic opportunities. Girl athletes deserve fair competition. Women's sports needs clarity around boundaries, or eventually the category itself becomes obsolete. The conversation that Sophie Cunningham has regenerated and brought to the table yet again, it's not about her. It's not about basketball. It's about whether our culture believes reality is something that we discover from God or it's something that we can create ourselves. Can we still say that men and women are different? Can we disagree with someone without hating them? Can we defend women's sports while treating transgender people with dignity? Those are real questions. And I think we're going to face versions of these questions over and over again in the years ahead, which brings me back to what Sophie Cunningham said at the beginning. She said, and I quote, I think it's kind of common sense. Maybe that's one of the clearest signs of our times that we're living in today. Things that once qualified as common sense now require courage to say out loud. In the words of Jesus, I leave you with this: fear not, I am the first and the last and the living one. I died, and behold, I am alive forevermore. Hey, my new book, Christ Killers, How His Death Becomes Your New Life, is a bold, honest look at our sin, our Savior, and the new life available only through the cross of Jesus Christ. You can get your copy today at christkillers.com or amazon.com. That's it for today. Thanks for listening. I hope this helped you understand the times and know what to do.